All right, it's time for another episode of The Rundown. I'm Sunny Galt. I'm a messenger with United Network News, and we are the news division of United Network. And our mission is to bring you the real news, what's really going on locally in our communities, what's happening in our states and provinces, what's happening in our countries, and then what's happening on our planet and throughout the multiverse, which is the entire universe, including all densities, all places within the universe. And our network releases a ton of content throughout the week. You know, we've got in-depth news coverage. We also have local stories as told through the eyes of our field messengers. We talk about the restoration of our planet and what we call the new Earth, which is really exciting. And we also have an update on what the crazy deep state is doing. I hesitate to even call them the deep state anymore because, you know, it's not the traditional deep state. Like when you talk to most people, they're like, oh, the deep state, Hillary Clinton and Nancy Pelosi, we're going to go get them. I mean, it's so much bigger than that, but it's just kind of an easy term, I guess, to use. Let's just say that if you guys aren't familiar with us, the rabbit hole goes very deep as to who the deep state actually is. But you have to kind of understand the big picture here and what's going on our planet so you can make choices that are best for you and your family. Because the news that is coming out is not what's really happening. It's not what's really happening on our planet. And so how can you function without truly understanding the situation? That's why we're here. So if you want more information about us, you can visit our website at unitednetwork.earth. Keep in mind, we do have a membership program that you guys can join if you want to get the content right away. If you can't afford that or, aren't really interested in that, that's fine. We do publish our content on YouTube and Rumble about a week after it goes out to our members. Now, we can't promise it's going to stay up there because social media, including YouTube and even Rumble sometimes, they kind of have a mind of their own. We could get flagged, information could get taken down, so it's always best to get it straight from our app. What this podcast is a week in review. So I take a look at the stories that we've covered over this last week. I try to give you the highlights. So if you want to go back and watch some of these reports as they come out on social media, you can do that. If you're a member, you can check them out anytime. So it's a great way to catch up on stories you may have missed. It's also good to be able to share this with other people. So it's kind of a condensed version. What's UNN? I have no idea what UNN is about. Well, hey, listen to this podcast episode. And for those of you who have shared the podcast, thank you very much. We really appreciate it. Throughout everything that we talk about, whether it is on our news updates, whether it's here on the podcast, I encourage you guys always think critically, always ask questions. Do your own research. So a little bit later on in this episode, when we get into the Global Intelligence Agency report, there's going to be a lot of locations that are mentioned as part of some things that are going on right now on our planet. I encourage you guys to look up this information. Don't just listen to us. Take action in some form. And then when you learn something, share it with other people because this is how we're going to help each other out. And it's not a, hey, look what I know, you don't know what I know kind of thing. We are here now. And if you're awake and aware, you are here to help other people. This isn't about, being super special and getting to say, I told you so. This is about your mission here. And even if you don't fully understand why you're here and your whole purpose, that's okay. I can guarantee that if you are listening to this podcast now, you have a role to play as all of this starts to unfold. And boy, is it unfolding quickly, which is exciting, right? No real announcements today, so I'm going to go ahead and skip that part. And yeah, let's check out the stories. Here are the rundown of stories you may have missed this week on UNN. Okay, let's kick things off with our field messenger reports. Our field messengers are the lifeblood of what United Network News is all about. Because for far too long, people on the news would just tell us a narrative, right? They would tell us whatever they wanted us to hear, whatever information was passed down to them, and that includes alternative media as well, guys. And we think one of the best ways to stop that And to get real news and to break down stereotypes is for people to show us. Take out your cell phone. Show us what's going on in your area. That could be more newsworthy items, things that are perhaps a little bit more timely. Maybe there's a fire happening or something else is going on, a large traffic congestion, something like that. Maybe people in your area are struggling for, clean water. So it could be news stories like that. It could be that there are really fun events happening. So we're celebrating and we're going to these, it feels like we're going to these occasions together when you guys cover that. Different traditions that people have, different ways of life. All this is so interesting. And like I said, it breaks down these barriers because part of what, let's just call them the deep state, part of what the deep state strategy was to separate us. And they've done a pretty good job. I hate to give them credit, but they've done a pretty good job at doing that. So now it is up to us to break down those walls and really get to know each other again. Tell your own stories. And again, that's what our Field Messenger program is all about. If you guys want more information on that, head on over to our website. You can just click the buttons that say, Field Messenger and learn how you guys can get involved. We actually have a Telegram group where you can join, ask questions, especially as you're working on stories. And our production team is there and would love to meet you. And in each news update that we do right now, we're doing 3 Field Messenger reports. So we've got a total of 9 reports to go through in this episode. And we'll kick things off with Amy in New Jersey, which is a state in the United States. She actually gives us an update on some construction that's going on for Pfizer. So Pfizer, as many of you guys know, you may recognize that name having to do with the COVID shot. They are a biomedical company and they do various things. So when they decide that they're going to tear a bunch of stuff down and rebuild, it's probably good to keep an eye on what's going on over there. So in Morris Plains, New Jersey, they have headquarters. And Amy noticed this. She gave us an update, or she told us, I guess, about the initial story. I think it was last year sometime. And she was updating us on the progress. And really, they haven't made a ton of progress with these buildings. I guess they did build a couple more, she called them warehouse buildings. They're kind of very plain buildings. They didn't really look like office buildings with a bunch of windows, but it's connected to some areas, some residential areas that they built. It's just, again, keep an eye on the stuff that's going on in your community. We don't really know what's going on with a lot of this stuff, but at least we know, even a year or longer later, I think she said at 1.2 years since they originally started construction, it just hasn't made a big impact, right? They haven't built a lot. And I actually think that that's a good thing. Maybe they don't have as much money. Not as many people are getting their shots, and all the new whatever new illnesses that come out. No one's interested in their vaccines for any of that. And hopefully we stay on that path. Okay, Sophia does a report from Tobago. So this is part of Trinidad and Tobago. And we called it Inner Light Guidance. So I love this story. Sophia, on her own, decided, and this is based on her relationship with one of her grandchildren. We hear, and we've done a lot of stories about this on UNN, about children and their natural abilities to connect to source and to tap into what I call their amazing superhuman powers. And children seem to have an easier time doing this. We all have the ability to do this, but for us as adults, we've been on this planet longer, and we've got a lot of mental issues to get through, to break through, I should say, to be able to do some of this stuff. But children are a little bit different. So I love that Sophia took this upon herself. She has a small group of children, and she was sharing the progress that they've made. So she does little exercises with them. So we saw, if you draw like a circle on a paper, by the way, all the kids are blindfolded, and you draw a circle on a paper and the child can predict what shape it is, right? Oh, that's a circle. And you can even get more complex, right? So you could put a circle on a, colored piece of paper. Well, what is the shape and what is the color? And it's pretty incredible. Sophia says even right out the gate, they are, getting about 80% correct by doing it this way, just kind of tapping in, and, tapping into their God-given gifts. In fact, she said she started to do this electronically. So that just shows you this is not just like a frequency. You've got to be in person to do this. But she has done this with kids online and sees the same results, which I think is really exciting. She's been doing this for about 6 months so far. So if you want to learn more from Sophia, you can check out that report, which came out last Monday. Drew from Australia. Did you know that Australia used to be one of the world's largest exporters of coal? So if you go around in Australia, there was a lot of remnants of that time and how popular the factories were and everything that's used in order to make coal. Different mines, things like that. So what Drew does is he shows us how a lot of these areas have been repurposed into beautiful, vibrant community spaces. And, these are areas for biking, like different paths, things like that. They actually turned some of the buildings. I think one was turned into a men's shed for various men activities and a school, I believe he said. So yeah, it's all about, this is part of restoration, right? Let's take something, that's not being used anymore and let's repurpose it and make it useful once again. All right, Monica out of Romania shows us the Mary Cemetery. I guess we were rhyming today with our stories. Mary Cemetery. So in a small village in the northern part of Romania, they celebrate death a little bit differently. And honestly, I hope we get to a point in the near future where we all start to look at death a little bit differently, right? Because these people in this area understood that this is an opportunity to meet the Creator, to come back perhaps in another form, but it should be a celebration of life as opposed to a tragedy, right? Regardless of how the person passed away. So this cemetery is very uplifting. There are these tombstones that are very brightly colored. You really have to watch the report to see. Very bright colors. The stories, it has like kind of a drawing of the person doing something they love to do. There's a message that's written on their tombstone, written in first person, right? So as if it were coming straight from the person. It's kind of like the person wrote a message and it's from the person that passed away to the living. And it's just to kind of, create, a connection between them. But it's a completely different way to look at death. And I think we could learn a lot from this. But check out the report because those tombstones are pretty cool. Jarrell out of Australia tells us about this free shop. So it's called the Spirit of Christmas Free Shop. And it's interesting it's called the Spirit of Christmas because I don't think anything in the shop had anything to do with Christmas. But we are talking about the spirit of giving, right? Everyone, not everyone. I realize there are tragedies that happen around Christmas time. But for most of us, that celebrate Christmas, this is a very encouraging time, right? This is a time where you might do more nice things. You're giving presents and things like that, but you may go out of your way for other people. So I think that's why he called it the Spirit of Christmas. But it is a shop that is all about giving without any strings attached. Everything in the shop is free and available to anyone at any time. So yes, that means this shop is open 24 hours. Doesn't even have to be manned. There doesn't have to be a person there because what are you trying to control? There aren't any rules. He said the only real rule is that the items have to be clean and they have to be in very good condition. So they have people donating items. And yeah, open 24 hours. He says has multiple locations. And we get an interview with the person that created the shop, which is just beautiful. He says there are no conditions for love. Isn't that nice? All right, Margaret out of Florida talks about this is another community project about giving to people in need. So have you ever heard of a community fridge before? This is a great way to distribute food to people in need. So Margaret tells us about an area in the Miami-Dade County, which is in Florida, the state of Florida in the United States. They have a program, I think it's called Buddy Fridge. That's what I thought it was Buddy Program, but now I think it's Buddy Fridge. Anyway, they have these fridges throughout the county, and their motto is take what you need, leave what you can. In fact, one of the fridges actually has that written on it. And, this is about giving what you can. And so maybe you're growing something, maybe you've got a garden and you've got, it seems like whenever I grow something, I've got way too much of it. And I'm like, wow, what am I going to do with this? That would be a great opportunity. Take it to one of these community fridges, and maybe you can take something that someone else donated and you can give something that you have too much of. And it's not that you have to give in order to take, because again, we're just trying to help people. And this is on the honor system. Again, very similar to the free shop. It's on the honor system. And really what makes both of these programs effective are the volunteers, right? And people being good-natured and really just wanting to help. So businesses could donate to these fridges. Individuals could donate. It's just a great program. And so hopefully we'll see more of these start to pop up. All right, CJ and Justin are out of New Hampshire, which is a state in the U.S. And I love this. They show us how to make elderberry syrup. Have you ever done that? I wasn't even quite sure what an elderberry was, to be honest. So this was an interesting story for me to learn a little bit more about the benefits, because apparently they are packed with antioxidants and vitamins, great for boosting your immune system, which is really helpful. Actually, today, I'm getting this report out a little bit later because I woke up, I don't usually get sick, but I woke up just feeling kind of achy and I had a sore throat. And we were supposed to, go out as a family and do a bunch of stuff today. And I just felt horrible. So this stuff can creep up on you, right? And it's nice to have things on hand that, can help you get out of these little health ruts that you may find yourself in. And so they show us how to make elderberry syrup. And it's kind of a simplistic way to do it, which I appreciate because I would be brand new to making elderberry syrup. All right, Veronica, who is out of Albuquerque, New Mexico, takes us to the 52nd Balloon Fiesta. It is an international balloon fiesta, a 10-day event featuring more than 500 hot air balloons. She says that makes it the largest ballooning event on Earth. Now, if you have never been near a hot air balloon as it's going up, it's a very unique experience. I did this. I was in Australia. This is many years ago. And we went out. We had to get there before sunrise. And we went up in the hot air balloon, and it was over the outback, and it was absolutely gorgeous. I can only imagine what it's like when 500 balloons are going up. But that's what they do at this balloon fiesta. And this is another one of those stories you really have to see it, because the balloons are all in a certain area and some are going up. And then, you can hear the flames of the fire as it's heating the hot air balloon. It sounds and looks like people had a really good time. Natalie does a report out of Thailand. So she's actually doesn't live in Thailand. She lives in Australia. So Natalie works with our field messengers. She's part of our news team. But she took a trip to Thailand, and she went to an elephant foundation. And hopefully I'll pronounce this right. Hua Hin in Thailand, that's where she was. And this is a rescue place for these elephants. All of the elephants have been through something traumatic, but they're such beautiful creatures. And Natalie had a chance to feed them and connect with them, and she just took us on this journey with her. She interviewed one of the people that works there. Her name is Sandra. I believe she's a volunteer, and just tells us more about their work. Let's talk about some of our news stories. These are stories that have usually more of an in-depth focus. They're a little bit longer. Our writing team and our research team does more work to find out the backstory of this. Sometimes Kim provides some information based on what she knows from leading the GIA. And we try to kind of give the backstory of what's really going on in some of these issues that are impacting our world. So these first stories are from Monday. We did a story about England's special education system. And this is designed to assist students with disabilities. However, It is strained right now. There are severe funding shortfalls, with nearly all school leaders reporting insufficient resources. And this has led to reduced teaching assistant hours, delayed diagnosis, inaccessible facilities, overcrowded classrooms, and it's really starting to impact students' academic and emotional development.
I am Neil Barber. I'm a content editor at ITV News Anglia. This is an issue that's really dear to me. My daughter's autistic, and I began to uncover failings in the SEND system by speaking to other parents. And what we've found is that children who have special educational needs have been forced into a position where they've had to take time off schools because their needs couldn't be met. We've also found that parents of children with special educational needs have had to use the legal system to get that education, and that many of those parents are either borrowing from banks or online lenders or using their savings just to fund those legal challenges. I have been consistently surprised by how isolated and alone a lot of parents are and how unsupported they become. They just don't understand why people don't believe in their children. They don't understand why they don't get the same opportunities as other children. They don't understand why they have to fight every single day for the simplest of things, an education for their child or a school place for their child.
So despite reforms and increased demand, educational outcomes for students with special needs remain stagnant. And this really underscores the need for urgent funding and comprehensive reforms. Dynamic pricing. Have you guys heard of this before? So dynamic pricing adjusts prices in real time based on market demand, competition, as well as other factors. And it's commonly used in industries like airlines and retail. So you'll see if you guys ever ordered or placed, do you really order an airline ticket? I guess that's not the right word. Have you ever bought an airline ticket online? You know you have to get it right away or the prices are going to change. That's part of dynamic pricing. And we're seeing this basically trickle out into other areas. Artificial intelligence enhances this strategy by analyzing data to optimize prices and manage inventory, which can benefit businesses by increasing their revenue and efficiency. However, there are also a lot of concerns with this as it gets more and more popular, like buyer discrimination, lack of transparency, and potential social inequality that can arise when prices vary based on personal data or peak demand.
What's dynamic pricing? You've seen it with airlines or Ubers, where based on demand, they can change the price any second, any minute of the day. So you have to be very smart about when you order or when you purchase a ticket. What's going to happen with AI is small mom and pop shops, grocery stores, you name it, will have the technology to be able to dynamically change prices throughout their store or for their services or products based on demand. And so this is going to really affect how you shop, how you're going to start to look at the world, when you buy things, when you don't buy things. Proponents of this new system argue that this is a more fair system, especially to those that wait for low demand seasons or low demand periods. But others are arguing that those that have inflexible schedules or busy schedules are going to really suffer.
So navigating dynamic pricing can be challenging, obviously. There are some tools out there that can help you. There's price comparison apps. There's loyalty programs that you can join to help you find better deals. Overall transparency and ethical practices are essential to ensure fairness and trust as part of this evolving approach using AI, right? We're all having to adjust with AI because it can be used responsibly. It's just a matter of how you do it, right? All right. I also did a story where he interviewed Dr. Paul Merrick. He is a clinical scientist, very well respected in his field. And he came out with a book last year that explores innovative cancer treatments through repurposed drugs and metabolic approaches. Okay, the book, if you guys want to check it out, it's called Cancer Care: The Role of Repurposed Drugs and Metabolic Interventions in Treating Cancer. And these repurposed drugs often are overlooked in traditional oncology. And what's nice about them is they target cancer stem cells. So it is addressing the root cause of cancer. And quite frankly, it's much more effective than standard chemotherapy. Not to throw chemotherapy and radiation completely out the window, because even Dr. Merrick talks about this. It's probably a combination. It depends on the type of cancer that you have. But we know that most people that go through chemotherapy aren't, coming out of it unscathed. Let's put it that way. And some people are still losing their life. A lot of people, right? So repurposed drugs, a lot of them got a bad rap after COVID. And here's a soundbite to explain that. This is actually Dr. Paul Merrick explaining what happened here.
Doctors can prescribe off-label drugs at their own discretion, and that it was perfectly acceptable to the FDA. But obviously, COVID changed everything because, the repurposed drugs challenged the narrative. And so, ivermectin, hydroxychloroquine, quercetin, melatonin, a whole list of drugs challenged basically the vaccines. So in order for the vaccines to be FDA approved, according to the FDA, in order to get the temporary authorization, there has to be no effective alternative drug in order to get the temporary approval. And so if people could show, ivermectin is effective against COVID, they would not have been able to get the RNA shots approved for COVID. That's essentially what happened. It had nothing to do. So ivermectin was very scary to them because it's a safe drug. It's been used by millions of people. It's highly effective.
Yeah, so that's just ivermectin, and in his book, Dr. Merrick talks about a lot more, okay? He emphasizes non-invasive treatments, including vitamin D, melatonin, even green tea, lifestyle changes such as intermittent fasting and exercise, and how it's really a combination of all this. I know a lot of us are looking for like the magic pill, maybe not literally, but we're looking for something, one single thing to fix everything. But the truth is how our body's gotten to this position, whatever it is, it was caused by many things. So why do we think one treatment is going to, cure everything? So there's a lot of natural ways to help treat cancer that, I'm not making any medical claims or anything, but obviously chemotherapy and radiation do a lot of damage to your body. Does it get rid of some of the cancer cells? Yeah, it does. But what else? What other harm is it doing? So we do need to be looking more at natural treatments for cancer and preventative treatments as well. And so, yeah, Dr. Merrick, his work definitely challenges conventional protocols. He also advocates for empowering patients to actively participate in their care and consider alternative options if they want better outcomes. All right, in Mexico, the Mexican government is banning junk food sales in schools by March of 2025. This is to combat rising obesity and diabetes amongst children. And apparently right now, about 35% of kids ages 5 through 11 in Mexico have been classified as overweight or obese. So they've created this program. It's called the Vida Saludable program. It mandates natural, minimally processed meals, seasonal produce, lean meats, and free drinking water in schools.
In a bold move to tackle childhood obesity, Mexico has given its schools 6 months to ban junk food or face hefty fines. The regulations, effective September 30th, target popular snacks like sugary drinks, chips, and chili-coated peanuts. Schools that fail to comply could be fined from $545 to $5,450, with steeper penalties for repeat offenders. UNICEF reports, Mexican children have the highest junk food consumption in Latin America, with 40% of their calories from these foods. President Claudia Sheinbaum emphasizes the need for nutritious alternatives. Think bean tacos and hibiscus flower water. But implementing these changes won't be easy. Only a small fraction of Mexican schools have clean drinking water. This ban aims to curb childhood obesity, where 1 in 3 children is overweight or obese.
Now, this is something that Mexico's been struggling with for a while. Now this focus is more on schools, but in general, we don't want kids to just be eating, bad stuff for them. That's obviously not good for their health and for their development. Now, with regard to free drinking water in schools, that allows kids to have an option to like the sugary sodas, right? But this is also a bigger issue because in Mexico, only 4% of public schools have drinking fountains. And here's another issue. There are sidewalk vendors that position themselves near schools. So even if the schools aren't selling unhealthy food, the moment the kids come out of the school, they're bombarded with all of these unhealthy snacks. So they're trying to create more guidelines, food guidelines, to make them a little bit more stricter. They also want an educational campaign to help shift eating habits and promote healthier lifestyles. So we'll keep an eye on that. Again, this is something that Mexico has been struggling with for a while. A recent investigation highlights significant gaps in enforcing animal welfare laws in the UK, where only 2.3% of violations lead to prosecution. Now, despite strict regulations, inspections are rare. Fewer than 3% of farms are inspected annually, and violations often go unpunished. This is one of those stories that you really need to see the video, which is a little heartbreaking. We know this kind of stuff goes on, and I think a lot of people that are listening to this podcast now, you probably do have some sort of connection with animals, right? Because it's life. And you're probably at a point where you're starting to realize that life is everywhere and everything is living. So how can we let these animals suffer in these different ways? These are questions that we are definitely going to have to address as part of the restoration of our planet. The Social Market Foundation report reveals that weak enforcement and reliance on industry self-regulation fail to protect animals from mistreatment, and this includes caged hens, mutilated pigs, and inhumane slaughter practices.
We need to do more proactive investigations, and we need to assist law enforcement to understand how to do those proactive investigations. And so yeah, that's why we were started, because I recognized that wasn't happening. I think that in terms of the barrier as to why law enforcement are not doing them, I think it's a lack of training and a lack of awareness. Definitely not a lack of will. Definitely not. I speak to so many great law enforcement officers who really want to work on these cases and unfortunately are not given the training and the resources to deal with them.
Yeah, I think that's a really good point. It is not necessarily that people don't want to help, but there might be legislation or things that are preventing them from really helping these animals. So we have to take a look at that as well. Okay, let's talk about open banking and what that is, because this is something the U.S. is apparently starting to embrace, although it may take a little bit of time for you guys to really see this take effect. So the Consumer Financial Protection Bureau, or CFPB, has introduced a new rule to enhance consumer control over financial data, promoting open banking in the U.S. So under this rule, banks and financial institutions must grant consumers access to their personal data upon request, enabling secure sharing with third-party providers. So if you want to change your bank, you want to do something a little bit differently, why is your information being held hostage by your current provider? Shouldn't we have a more open system where your information goes where you want to go? So this regulation aims to boost competition and innovation by making it easier for people to switch their services, also manage payments, and obtain better financial options. Privacy safeguards include requiring explicit consent for data use and banning risky practices like screen scraping. While proponents highlight its potential benefits, critics cite unclear guidelines and security concerns. and legal challenges could also impact its implementation. So again, something we got to keep an eye on. I'm sure there's going to be a lot of different entities challenging this. They don't want to lose your business, and that's one way they feel like they can keep you is if they have your personal information. So let's see where this goes. Let's talk about using AI, which we talked about a little earlier, and how it is impacting schools. So as AI technology becomes a major part of education, schools are now adopting AI detection tools like GPT-0 and Turnitin to address academic dishonesty. So these tools are aimed to assist educators and flag, work that's been created essentially with AI, because the teachers want it to be straight from their students, right? You don't want to assign something to students and they just go on ChatGPT and turn in a paper after they type in a few words. That doesn't make a lot of sense. What are they actually learning? And what they found is this is actually disproportionately affecting non-native English speakers and neurodivergent students who may use more simple vocabulary. So there's certain things, obviously, these programs are using to try to detect whether or not something was done through AI. And it's flagging people that have certain writing styles. And this is causing false accusations, which can obviously harm academic standing and mental well-being. And it's also prompting calls for balancing AI with human judgment.
Have you heard of students being falsely accused of using ChatGPT to cheat? You have to see this. In a world where AI is advancing at a rapid rate, teachers are really struggling and are falling behind. So they've turned to a tool called ChatGPT-0, which claims to be able to tell if something was written by ChatGPT or not. The only problem is this doesn't always work. A few students decided to put it to the test and put an official document over a decade old into ChatGPT-0. The result? It false flagged it as something that ChatGPT wrote. As a result of this, they had to put an update into GPT-0's terms, stating that this tool cannot be used to punish students. So if your teacher is using this tool, it's time to send them this video and tell them that they're out of date.
So what students are doing now is then they're using another third-party service to help humanize their text, right? So whatever they're writing, how do I make this sound more human? It's like we're using technology to combat technology. We're doing something wrong here, right? We had another soundbite that was part of this story that talked about how, I think it was actually with a teacher who talked about how it's really a balance, right? It's not saying that using an AI tool is wrong. It's about, getting to know your student and having dialogue about this and knowing when it's appropriate and how to use this technology as opposed to banning it and then having third-party services that help detect it and then students develop or, find another platform that's going to help, go against the teacher's program. And it's just like, where does this stop? This is insane, right? Okay, a very important story that we ran this week that I encourage you guys to check out. I'm actually not going to play a soundbite, but it's a great story about our cookware and the chemicals in our cookware. And there are a lot of people talking about this online, so I thought it was worth doing a story. And it has to do with non-stick options, which I know it's nice. I have to cook for my family. I get it. But they have harmful PFAS in them, which are these forever chemicals. And that's linked to a whole myriad of health issues, cancer and infertility, things like that. And you basically have to go past looking for labels like PFAS free. That can be misleading. And you really need to, if you can, change up your cookware. And this isn't just your pots and pans, although using cast iron or stainless steel, even carbon steel can help with that. Think about your plastic utensils, okay? Because especially the black plastic, it's recycled black plastic from electronics that have had a lot of different chemicals put on them. And now you are scooping up your food with it, putting it on your plate. It is a mess, especially when exposed to high heat. Okay, so we're going to have to go through a purge. I know it's not great for the wallet. I get it. I'm in the same boat. My husband and I are looking at our pots and pans right now. This is another reason I wanted to do the story. And we're trying to figure out, well, what are we going to switch to? And what are the issues with that? Because we know that there's these chemicals and we're trying to get away from them as much as possible. And our final story is about people going back to work after the pandemic, meaning they were working remotely, right? Which drastically changed the workplace, right? But now a lot of companies are trying to get their employees, I should say, to come back. Well, here's the problem with that. You kind of let the cat out of the box, right? The genie out of the box, whatever the expression is, because these employees, while they were able to work from home, they've been able to see the flexibility in that. And they really prefer some sort of hybrid or remote setup for achieving more work-life balance. And it also usually lowers costs, at least for the employee. However, there are companies that are enforcing strict return to office mandates, and they are citing the importance of collaboration with other employees, productivity, and they're also using them. This is kind of scary. They're also using these, you got to come back to work as a subtle way to lay people off because they know they're not going to come back to work. And then that gives them an excuse to lay them off. The problem is all of these policies, they lead to dissatisfaction and talent loss. And they found that this is especially happening with women and millennials.
Think about the young professionals who started working right around the pandemic. Some of them have never known a pre-pandemic workplace. And so if you're an employer that we're hearing so much about return to work right now, if you're an employer that is enforcing 100% in office, you're probably going to lose a really good portion of candidates in that top talent pool because that's just not what they're interested in.
This is actually good. This is a good time for us because it is forcing us to reevaluate how we've always done things. I remember here in the US, it was like this big thing 10, 20 years ago when people found out that Starbucks, not that I'm a big fan of Starbucks, but Starbucks offered full benefits to part-time workers. And there was a lot of discussion at that time about, wow, a lot of people want to work for Starbucks because they're getting their, this coverage that they really need for themselves and their families. And there was a lot of talk about treating your employees with respect and really fulfilling their needs outside of work. And you hear this like, some of the big tech companies, all the things they do for their employees and how, their office is really like a campus and, you can get your nails done and your hair done and all this crazy stuff. I'm not saying we have to go that far. That's a little crazy. That kind of makes me think that maybe we're giving these tech companies a little bit too much money. But we should be treating our employees well. And when we do that and when we meet their needs in other ways, they will stay. Because it's about a relationship, and that's where we're headed. Here are some highlights from the Global Intelligence Agency reports with Kimberly Gogan. So Monday, we actually did not have a GIA report from Kim. Things were crazy, okay? So you won't find a report for that. So let's talk about what was discussed on Wednesday and Friday. Both of those reports were a little bit longer. I think Wednesday's was really long. We can't go into everything into detail, but I'm here to give you guys the highlights. So on Wednesday's report, Kim said it was a crazy weekend, which obviously continued on through Monday. The deep state, and remember what I said about the deep state, it's not the Hillary Clintons that are hanging around doing this. There is shadow military groups and people that have been around for a very long time that have been controlling things that are what I'm referring to as the deep state. So they were waiting for standing orders. The question is, what standing orders were they expecting? So standing orders is something that happens in this context, as we get more and more light on this planet, because for a very long time, it was about balance, even though the dark had no idea how to do balance and did a really horrible job of balance. That was the whole idea, right? Because we have free will. So there would be times where our planet would be darker, to allow you to experience the dark. There would be times where it would be lighter to experience the light, but it's been a very long time since we've had any of that. Like I said, the dark does not share well. Okay, so the people that were running this planet that were more dark than light would create these standing orders. So in the future, if the planet gets too light, which has nothing to do with what source wants, this is their own agenda, okay, then XYZ is going to happen. It's like kind of like a dead man switch. So you don't have these beings that are actively doing this. These are standing orders, things that have been programmed to happen at a certain point. Not usually a date, although we'll talk about that in a second because there are some things that were dependent on dates that we're going to talk about. But this was based on how much light was coming into the planet. And if there's too much light, then you have to counter it with something. You have to create chaos and fear, which brings in that dark energy to help the dark, get back on top, essentially. And what's interesting about this, because they've done this several times, is Kim says these revelations, again, started over the weekend and into Monday, were reflectant of things we've seen in religious texts. A lot of people have questions about the book of Revelations in the Bible, okay? And there's probably other religious texts, but, I spent many years, as a Christian studying the Bible, so that's what I'm most familiar with. And I thought that I would always be here for that time. That's just something that I knew to be true. And it's interesting to see how this stuff is playing itself out, because these standing orders were set to trigger, like I said, as we got more and more light. And they could tell, these beings that ran this planet for a long time could tell that was going to happen at some time. They're just triggers to try to get us to go back to the dark. So I thought it'd be interesting to play this soundbite from Kim, who talks about some of the things that are commonly discussed in Revelation and where these points, because she's going to mention a lot of locations. This is great stuff to be able to look up and, kind of track and look up these locations, look at some photos and things like this. I think it's really going to help a lot of us connect these things we've been told forever that were going to happen. And yeah, there were standing orders for this stuff to happen, but it didn't, okay? Because what these beings couldn't predict is the golden age, which is the time that we're transitioning to right now. Here's Kim.
And when I say that it looked like we had some revelations, well, the first set of revelations actually looked like the revelations from the Bible. And it took me a little bit to figure out what was happening because it's a little bit different than it was explained in the books. So what we had, the first set of locations that we had discovered was a lot of really negative frequencies and electromagnetic pulse type weaponry, scalar weapons, coming from several locations in the world. And these locations were Detroit underneath the Guardian building, Chicago underneath the Sears Tower, Los Angeles at the tar pits, or just outside of LA, Houston at the NASA site. Remember, Houston, we have a problem. Seattle underneath the Needle, Albuquerque underneath Black Mountain, Phoenix, Arizona underneath Camelback Mountain, and Miami underneath the Freedom Tower, and in San Francisco underneath the Golden Gate Bridge. And what we found at the time that was interesting was it all seemed to be around very annoying frequencies, very loud noises potentially, that type of thing. Well, apparently, after further research, this turns out to be your trumpets, your trumpet version in the Bible. Then we went on from there to the bowl locations, the pouring out of the bowls. I laugh because they always seem to tell us what they plan on doing. And I'm not necessarily talking about the deep state even. I'm talking about what the non-humans had planted here on this planet for such a time. So next, the bowl locations, or wrath, the quote-unquote wrath of God that was supposed to happen would have been underneath Washington, D.C., Bern, Switzerland, and right underneath the child eater statue, and you can look that up. Bangkok, underneath the giant 5.5-ton gold Buddha. Belarus, underneath the Stalin line. Wuhan, underneath the Yellow Crane Tower. Beijing, underneath the Forbidden City. Cairo, Egypt, underneath the Citadel of Saladin. Tokyo, Japan, underneath the Edo Castle Ruins, EDO. And in Istanbul, under the Hagia Sophia Mosque in Cathedral. So that was our next set of things that were due to come off. And they were pretty tumultuous. It would have, used earthquakes, the whole thing, pretty much everything you read in the book that they warned us about ahead of time. And then from there, we went to the quote-unquote Fall of Babylon site, which, believe it or not, would have been in Moscow, Russia, underneath Red Square. There were some definite triggers there that would have, if it was still in place, would have broken down the overlay over the gate to source, which I've told you quite a while ago is underneath Moscow, is underneath Red Square. Next, the beast was due to rise from Bogota, Colombia, underneath the Montserrat Sanctuary. This is really interesting. And the quote-unquote false prophet, or a frequency of untruth, which is what was supposed to come out of here, was in the Congo Basin on the African continent. It's quite a large basin. Then we went to the seal locations, which would have been the unsealing, I guess, of what you would call in the Bible, devil, Satan locations. This would have been in Pakistan under the Lahore Fort. Next would have been Tehran under the Asadi Tower. Dhaka in Bangladesh underneath the Pink Palace. In Nigeria, in Lagos, I'm not even going to try to pronounce this, but it's the Osun Osogbo Sacred Grove. I'll spell that for you in case you want to look it up. It's the OSUN-OSOGBO Sacred Grove. And in South Sudan, it would have been the Al-Nahedi Tomb. In Sao Paulo, Brazil, it would have been the Basilica de Penha Church. In Baghdad, Iraq, it was the Martyr Monument. Buenos Aires, Argentina, under the Obelisco. And in Santiago, Chile, under the Sanctuary on San Cristobal Hill. So, like I said, it was pretty busy in all of these locations and several others we're going to talk about here in just a minute, that you would have found the deep state. And they were sitting there at the ready, waiting for these things to go off, thinking that somehow it would have given them access to an AI system, and what they were discussing in particular was access to the financial system and some control. I'm not sure how the wrath of God translates to money to these people, but that's what they believe. So again, it was just a bunch of cleaning of space junk that was put there by somebody else to create a worldwide mass hysteria of all of these events that would have taken place, which would have not led to the second coming of Christ. I can tell you that.
Yeah, far from it. So Kim talked about a lot of stuff on Wednesday's report. She also described how she and her team were able to find more locations of people/non-people outside of the hologram. When I say the hologram, I'm talking about this matrix. When you and I wake up every day, we see things a certain way. There can be good matrices and bad matrices, okay? This would have been a negative matrix to make us view life in a way that the dark wanted us to view life. But we've talked about this in the past. There were like little bubbles. I think Kim called them bubble cities, for lack of a better term, where there were beings, again, both human and non-humans, would exist outside of the matrix. And we're starting to see this more, and we're starting to break this down because we've converged into one timeline, which is important to know right now. Because the secret space program and their operatives found a way to split their consciousness, and they've been doing this for a very long time. We're just finding out about this. To split their consciousness between themselves and multiple clones. And what they did is they put their consciousness in these other clones in other timelines at different points in history. And this is all based on Project Looking Glass. If you've never heard of Project Looking Glass, look it up. There's whistleblowers talking about it online. But this is their way to see into the future. They knew there was going to be a big event, something that happened, and this was their way to be able to predict with a certain amount of certainty, I guess, that things were going to happen a certain way. And if they didn't want that thing to happen, well, what would you do? What could you do? And then this was, I guess, their brilliant idea. Let's clone ourselves a bunch of times. There were upwards of 30,000 of these beings, you guys. So when I say they were really cloning themselves, they were really cloning themselves and putting themselves in multiple timelines. The problem is when all the timelines converge into one, you have a little bit of a mess. Because you have multiple clones running around on the same timeline, on the same planet, which is not good for them because this is a little bit out of my wheelhouse, guys. I can't say that I'm a clone expert, but there is something that happens that they can basically die if they come into contact with each other. Also, if the original human dies, then all the clones die as well. So this was a very long explanation. Kim got out her whiteboard for this. If you want more information, again, this was Wednesday's report, Wednesday from last week. So I encourage you guys to check that out. She also said there's just a lot of confusion out there right now. In the alternative media, they're talking a lot about Nisara Jasara. Again, Google it if you haven't heard of it before, which is not going to happen, but it has to do with a reevaluation of currencies. And it kind of falls into the whole Q movement, I guess you can call it. And she explains why that's not going to happen. We've said before, this is pie in the sky, not going to happen. But people are they've been doing this for a while, to make drastic financial decisions based on the fact that some currency is going to be reevaluated. They're going to have all this wealth. Kim talks about these bunkers that are supposed to have all this gold and stuff. What's really going on with that? So if you've heard of those stories before, you've seen stuff online, and you want to know the backstory, again, Wednesday's report is a good thing to check out. I don't follow any of that stuff, and like I said, it can be kind of confusing without the whiteboard and, seeing all of it laid out. So I would just encourage you guys to check out the report yourself. She also says there are some weird orders that are coming down from the Trump operatives for the people that are still taking orders. These are people that believe that Trump's a good guy, and this kind of might tie into Q a little bit. Again, I don't follow Q, but there are good people out there, patriots, so to speak, that think that they are helping by assisting Trump in various ways. They think they are fighting the quote-unquote deep state. But here's the thing. They're starting to think something is wrong because they were told if Trump gets back into office, which I know he's the president-elect, so he doesn't officially get back into office until, January 20th, I think. That hasn't happened yet. But we all know this is a dog and pony show for our benefit. So behind the scenes, they have been meaning the Trump operatives have been making a lot of promises. And, we're going to go after the deep state and we're going to end these wars and do all this kind of stuff. Well, the election was a while ago and you're still not doing anything. So there are people that thought that Trump was going to come and fight the deep state and they were supporting him. Okay, these are, people that would carry out other orders and do things on behalf of someone they thought was leading a rebellion against the deep state, because that's what the whole Q movement is all about, right? Trump's going to save everybody. And so that's not happening. And they're starting to think something is wrong. And Kim says there's a little bit of a mutiny going on and they're starting to go against the order. So obviously we'll be tracking that because that's important. But maybe not as important as the next thing I'm going to tell you. Okay, so this was Friday's report. I've got two different sound bites I'm going to play for you. The first one is about ambulances showing up at Mira Lago, which is Trump's residence. So I'm going to warn you in advance. This gets a little out there. If you're brand new to watching our news, to understand, I've already talked a little bit about clones, so maybe it's not going to be that crazy, but this gets into clones too. So for some people, that may be too far out there, and I get it. We've been lied to about everything. So, it's easy to say, oh, this person's a clone and that person's a clone. They're really dead. A lot of that's true, all right? And that is true with Trump. We've talked about this before. He has two different clones. One is a lot more advanced than the other. And you're going to hear all about it in this soundbite. And again, this leads into this talk online, which got shushed up real quickly. And of course, all of the fact checkers out there, if you try to Google ambulances at Mira Lago, they're all going to be like, inaccurate or wrong or whatever they say when, something didn't happen when it actually did. So what in the world was going on? Why were there ambulances at Mira Lago? This is going to blow your mind.
There are rumors circulating that there were several ambulances along with other Secret Service vehicles that left the Mira Lago facility abruptly. I think it was yesterday afternoon the rumors started swirling. And, as always, when you have Duck Dynasty in charge, it was a fiasco. Now, let's explain one quick thing so you understand what's happening down there. So with clones, there's often some kind of a tether to the original soul or the original being. In order to create the clones, there's definitely an etherical tie. And if something happens that breaks that tie, then it's only a matter of time, usually 72 hours or less, before the clones start to malfunction and eventually pass away as well. So in this particular case, we're talking about the president-elect. Duck Dynasty, you did it again, didn't you? Okay, so the fiasco that was orchestrated yesterday was actually a minor incident that happened with, let's call it clone number one of Trump. And the minor incident was allegedly something they were staging. They were contemplating using this because if they used it on this particular day and said that something happened, they could call it a fake assassination, they could call it a medical incident, and then he would have passed away today. This was their plan. So the staging began, and coincidentally, if they had announced it today, it would have been the same day that JFK was shot. See the big picture here, big patriots, everybody loves JFK or loved JFK. Well, not everybody, but in this particular case, in the public eye, and wouldn't it be a coincidence that the deep state did it on the same day as JFK? And oh my God, and this was kind of the plan. But due to all of the other events that are happening with this 11/11/2022 portal, there was definitely a severing between Clone 1 and Clone 2. I feel like I'm doing a Dr. Seuss thing here. It's Thing 1 and Thing 2. And they both began to malfunction in different ways. So Clone 1 was kind of on its last legs as of this morning. My guess would be it won't last through the night. And I know that there's currently a place in Mira Lago where they're kind of all sitting around waiting to see what happens. They did close the residence at Mira Lago today to the Secret Service. The Secret Service was not allowed to go in there. Today, we got a call from someone there on the inside. And they that is because they tried to do some type of an esoteric life force transfusion, if you will, and it failed. And the secret space program people we call Duck Dynasty, the Cowboys, they couldn't figure out anything else to do to save Clone 1. So they ended up bringing in Clone 2 into the same facility. And Clone 2 is a little bit different than Clone 1. Clone 1 was kind of flesh and blood and those types of things, you know, normal person with a soul. That was different than the originals, but a soul nonetheless. But Clone 2 was more of a hybrid, not really human, let me put it that way to you, and more of an esoteric kind of way. Depending on which facility they made the clone at, it would be how natural it was. So Clone 2 wasn't quite so natural. So they brought in Clone 2, and then Clone 2 began to malfunction in a very unnatural way. It became apparent to other Secret Service members, and the SSP couldn't hide it, that this was not a person. There are certain things that a person's body can do. They bend in certain ways, we move in certain ways, and this was no longer moving in those ways. Plus, the speaking became erratic and somewhat insane, really, as Clone 2 started to malfunction due to the severing of Clone 2. So eventually Clone 2 became so insane, it became violent, and it started to attack people, and apparently they had to put Clone 2 down. So it was kind of funny. You know, I wish I could tell this as a joke, you know, two clones and some SSP people walk into a bar. No, I'm just kidding. But that's what it kind of felt like today, because I'm watching this and I'm like, wow, what a circus that is. That is a circus. So I do not know if the Secret Service was ever let in to see the status of Clone 1 and what's going to happen from here. They missed the mark on today because they were a little bit distracted with everything that's going on. Are they going to say that he passed away in 11/22? I don't know. Are they going to announce that there was a passing away? I'm not sure. The only reason why I think this might happen is because of all the promises the secret space program operatives have made out there to many, many, many people. Not only is there a lot of money promised, there are also a lot of positions promised. And sometimes, in a lot of cases, let's just say, the same position was offered to several different people. That would be people like Dan Bogdino. I know he does a podcast of some sort. I never really watched it, but he's been promised. He's an agency guy, as most of these alt media, Joe Rogan is as well, and a lot of the higher end, I guess you would say, a lot of you folks that are on the internet are also, ex-agents. Jesse Ventura, and these are all facts, not questions, not guessing. Alex Jones. Most of them, if you make it to the big time, you were involved with the agency in some way, shape, or form. When the alt media became popular, even before the days of YouTube and people were doing conference calls and blog talk radio, they were still inserting their own people in there so they could maintain control of the narrative. It's the reason why we see so many Q things and Trump things and whatnot throughout the media. So because Bogdino was a big supporter, he was promised a position for his support, and that position was head of the Secret Service. Good luck to you. There is probably also another 12 people, just guessing, well, not really guessing, that had also been promised the same position. So it's going to be kind of probably a game of musical chairs if they keep Trump alive. Now, the talk amongst the secret space program folks, Duck Dynasty, is that they are thinking of using a situation. This is before today's circus, where they could say that he passed away, what a hero, what a martyr. But Vance is going to keep up the fight, and Vance is our guy, and who's also an ex-CIA agent, by the way. Vance is our guy, and he's going to do the thing, and keep supporting Vance, and just like you supported Trump, he'll carry on his legacy, and all of these types of things. But behind the scenes, they can say, oh, sorry, Mr. Bogdino, and 9,000 other people that were promised positions. That was kind of a Trump thing, and he's not here anymore, and sorry about that, and they can get out of their promises that they made to people like Elon Musk and other folks as well. And they, Vance could say, oh, I'm sorry, you didn't talk to me about that. I didn't know anything about it. And then that would kind of alleviate a little stress from them because, today was another payday, of course, a day ending in Y. And, there's a lot of pressure on them right now, and they don't like it. A lot of people are turning their backs on them. There's not a whole lot of people listening to their orders anymore. And they thought this would be a perfect out. But it kind of backfired today because it really actually happened. They didn't have a choice anymore. Are they going to announce anything? I don't know. They might just throw up another guy in a mask. Why not? We've had a masked president in the U.S. for the last 4 years, 3 years and some odd days, because it was shortly within like a week or two that happened. So I don't know. It'll be interesting to see what they do from here on out. That's not the only clone on the planet that also passed away due to the severing of ties. There were several elite members, some names you know, some names you don't know. Are they going to actually announce that these people also died? I'm not sure. Still waiting for December. Remember, everybody dies in December, really.
Yeah, so the whole dying in December, this is something the deep state loves to do because there's not that much going on in December. So if you look back at really important people, they all died in December. Did they really? No, they did not. But that's when they're going to tell everyone they died because no real business happens in December due to the holidays. And probably some stupid alignment or something as well. But, okay, if you didn't already think that you were in the twilight zone with this whole Trump thing, now you really do, right? The crazy thing is this is real. This is real. And this is when I say truth, you guys, is stranger than fiction. If you're a big sci-fi person and you love to watch those kind of movies, that pales into comparison with what we're going through. And it's usually those kind of movies and stuff are usually based on real things. This is their way of telling you, hey, cloning is going on. Hey, remember Star Wars? That actually happened. I mean, it's absolutely insane. All right, the last soundbite that I want to play for you guys has to do with the 1111 portal. Okay. Which maybe you didn't even know was a portal. Okay. But there were things that would happen. Kim says it's not like on a every 5, 10, 15 year basis, but at times these portals would open. And the time that the portal would be open, if it did open, was 11/11 through 11/22. Friday was 11/22, which is why Kim was telling us about this. Now, for decades, there have been people with positive intention and purposes trying to open these portals during this time. So they would go to various locations and try to connect with source. So again, it's for a positive purpose. But we didn't have a lot of information as to why, it opened at certain times. And this was the end of that period. So what happened this year? This also ties into the Legion of Angels that showed up last year. Remember how they showed up? We were all excited and we were like, what the heck? Aren't they going to come in here and save our butts? Because we're always looking for a savior, right? A lot of us fell into that trap again. And we knew they were here. Well, could it tie into this 11/11 to 11/22 portal as to why they were here and what they were doing? So here's Kim, and I want to give you a heads up. She is using a whiteboard, so it takes her a little bit longer to explain things, and you might hear some marks on the whiteboard or, as she's talking. So just bear with us. The information's good. It just takes a little bit longer to get the information out when you're writing at the same time.
11/11 in our calendar really doesn't make a difference. It's what it actually does within the universe. So we know we have more than 12, but let's call it the 12 universes and densities. Of the Alphaverse. And we call that the light side of the Alphaverse, the light side of the universes. And you also have 12 down of the what was the Omegaverse, or the dark side of the universes. Smack dab in the middle here, you have what's called a nil. And if you're familiar with quantum computing, and this isn't just about quantum computing, it's also about quantum physics, you have the nil, or the positive 0 and the negative 0. We can call it a density, but basically, just as in quantum computing, you have 1s, 0s, and a nil. And a nil has an infinite space in between. But here, you would call it the 0 point of the nil. So, during this particular time, between 11/11 and 11/22, there used to be some portals that would open, and you could call these two false densities. So that goes all the way down. So 11/11 would be where the 0 point kind of opens, and you would have, positive 1 and negative 1 here, and they would meet. Now, the significance behind this really doesn't have anything to do with, a portal to God or the Creator, or, all the way up, all the way down, however you want to put it. It actually brought you to a false space, which existed around what we call our central sun, and the anti-central sun. But what it did do is it actually brought some interesting things here on Earth. Because we are a nexus planet here on Earth, you would say we also had several locations in the world where there were portals that would open. Minimum, you would have had, probably 12 of the nil. You would have had at least 12 for one side, but I use the term one side and another 12 for the other side. So really, you had the 24, 36 here on Earth, 36 different locations that would be quote unquote activated. So we've talked in the past about what we call realm owners, and how, for example, 3 up through 3 down, we had Michael, Raphael, and Gabriel, and then you would have had the archangel, all kind of in the same being, that would monitor those realms. But each realm owner also had what we call guardians, or guards, really, or gatekeepers. So it was a one time, I guess you would say, of year, and certain years would have been more relevant than others because it didn't always activate fully every year. It was once every several years, and it was more based on, events, then it was based on a timing thing. So you can't say, well, every 7 years this is going to happen. Every 20 years this is going to happen. It's not really that way. It's based on events and what's going on in the universe. So this is a time where guardians and gatekeepers would basically duke it out. So we had guardians and gatekeepers, for example, on for densities 1 through 3, both up and down, because of the way things were. They were the same group of people. And this was a dual group. So we had both Tarzakians, probably not spelling that right, and we had Targethians. So Targethians and Tarzakians, we know about Tarzakians. Those are kind of the smoky beings you see, the shadows in the night. They would have been their connection down to the 8th density of the lower astral. Because remember, Dark Age and everything up to the 6th density was completely 100% dark for quite a while there. And the Targethians would have been tied to the Pleiades and a star called Target there. So they monitored a portal there, which would also open at this time. So because they were quote unquote connected to those same portals here on Earth, they would become more present, so to speak, and there would be originally there would be some kind of a fight for control, because those access points and portals were open both up and down. Same thing for 4, 5, and 6. This is where your reptilians were. Your reptilians would have monitored those spaces on behalf of Artemis. So Artemis was also a red reptilian, so to speak, literally cherry red, and her minions were what you know as reptilians. So they kind of have a human-shaped body in a lot of cases, not always, but she alone and her army, or guards or guardians or gatekeepers, were not only of her caliber. She also had a partner even further down here. Her partner was Baal. So you would have had replicas of Baal that also would have been considered guardians and gatekeepers of 4th, 5th, and 6th. Then we have 7, 8, and 9. And guardians and gatekeepers of 7, 8, and 9 would have been in part due to the overlays, Omega system, and whatnot. You would have had Astaroth on the one side. And this is kind of, if you do follow the Q thing, it's why they keep talking about the green, because Astaroth is known for green. Wherever you see a lot of like dark green plasma, you would see Astaroth. So interestingly enough, there you go. So on behalf of Anti-Source, I guess you would say, which would have been Astaroth's partner, there would have been a fight between Anti-Source and Source, and then of course whoever was fighting on behalf of Source on the other side over here. In this case, you kind of got me. But this time of year, it was a time for the guards and the guardians. It's almost like part of a war that would actually take place when they were fully open, like they were this year. For some reason, still don't have that defined just yet. Why this year? Probably because we became too light. that kind of thing. All of the lower astral beings, ran the risk of losing. We don't have a lot of these beings over here anymore, but that alignment still meant in the past that there would be a fight between the quote unquote angels and the demons that would occur on Earth at this time. If you remember, last year, this time is pretty close to the time where we had, I think it was on the 13th or so of November of last year, and don't quote me on that one, but that's when we had the legions come upon Earth. And we thought the legions were going to help us fight the bad humans. I definitely thought that from some of the things that I saw, but I guess what I didn't realize is how many of those beings were here on Earth were part of the guards and the gatekeeper groups. I don't know. They came, they saw, they conquered after the gate closed. We didn't hear a whole lot from them after a few weeks. And I thought, well, gee, everybody that comes here just bails on us and leaves us stuck here with the crazy humans. In some cases, non-humans, in some cases, clones. And, but I guess, it was the time of a battle. They came, they battled, they did their job on behalf of Source. I didn't really know at the time, but apparently a lot of the people that they were battling against were probably some of these guards that were still left here, at that time. It's interesting. At least things are coming to light that make more sense to me now, because there was no one else here. No one else came because there was no one really on the other side this year, but we did have some space junk and things like that left at various portal sites, which we did clean up. But this is what got the deep state, I guess, all riled up. But we were able to sever any kind of ties at this time to beings that had sent their soul down to the lower astral or into the nil or time of no time zone. And it just happens to be that the orange guy was just one of many people that lost their tie. So I'm hoping we see a lot of others that went through this process of the cloning process. Maybe we'll see a lot of clones going away. Can't do anything about the CIA's professional mask making division, but at least the actual people that make those decisions may no longer be with us. So within the next 72 hours, in theory, that's the theory, because this hasn't really ever happened before. So the opening was positive in some ways, and it was also negative in others, because it was a lot of work to clean up anything that had been left by the old guards and gatekeepers and realm owners in order to ensure that they were prepared for a battle.
All right, so now we know why Trump's clones went crazy, right? It had to do with this portal. At the time that we ran the original report on Wednesday, we didn't know why. And thank you, Source, for providing some more information. And now we know why there's no more Trump, no more clones of Trump. We'll see what happens there, right? And this is affecting other people. I actually saw in the news today that another Rothschild passed away. And I'm like, oh, probably another clone. We had no idea these clones were running around. How crazy is that? All right, guys, that wraps up another episode of The Rundown. If you want more information about us and learn how you can become a member, get all of our content as soon as it comes out, visit unitednetwork.earth. That gives you our complete news updates, our New Earth interviews, our Global Intelligence Agency reports, and information about all things restoration. This is The Rundown, and I'm Sunny Galt for United Network News, signing off.